is the Wrestlebread Podcast, bringing you the latest news, recaps, and analysis of AEW and WWE. Get the unique perspective from a wrestling fan of over 25 years. Here's your host, Jaydee.
What's going on, guys? This is Jaydee here, and this is episode 34 of the Wrestlebread Podcast. Merry Christmas to everyone who celebrates. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, or if you just don't celebrate at all, happy end of 2019, end of a decade, end of a very chaotic year in wrestling and in the world as well. I really didn't watch much of Friday Night SmackDown on Friday because I went to see Rise of Skywalker. I'm not going to give out any spoilers, but I didn't really like the movie. The biggest issue I have with this movie is that it's the end of a trilogy, end of 40 plus years of a storyline with Star Wars and the story of the Skywalkers. And I always feel like a trilogy should be done by one person, or at least two people are working together where the story kind of continues flawlessly. And J.J. Abrams did The Force Awakens, then Rian Johnson did The Last Jedi and undid things from The Force Awakens. And then with The Rise of Skywalker, it undid some things from The Last Jedi. So if you're the type of person that kind of asks questions or, things has to make sense, you may not like this movie. There's people who like this movie, and I have no problem with it. If you liked The Rise of Skywalker, I'm not going to kill you for it, but just me personally, I really didn't like it. It's not as bad as Attack of the Clones, I would say. Attack of the Clones, I would say, is one of my least favorite Star Wars. Out of the 9 movies, my least favorite out of all of them. I put maybe Rise of Skywalker, maybe third worst. I would put Attack of the Clones and then The Phantom Menace and then Rise of Skywalker. There are good things about this movie. The lightsaber battle you see in the trailer between Rey and Kylo Ren that was surrounded by water, that was a pretty good fight. But I just didn't like some of the decisions that they made. As you could clearly tell from the trailer, Palpatine is in this movie, but there's really not a lot of things that make sense about it. It just makes you ask a lot of questions. They leave a lot of things open in this movie, and I feel like they needed another movie to explain the things that happen in this movie. So if you go out and see it and, you like it, that is fine with me. If you don't like it, we're in the same boat. And then also I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, so I took 2 L's this weekend because the Cowboys lost to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I live in Philly, so, there are people who were sending me emails at work of, Carson Wentz and all that stuff. But I'm a realist. I expected Dallas Cowboys to probably finish 8-8 again, but hopefully we will get a new coach this next season. But getting back to wrestling, it's been a crazy year this year. We had, people who had passed away, including Ashley Massaro, Mean Gene Oakland, Harley Race, King Kong Bundy as well. We had a lot of great moments. We had Becky 2 Belts. We had Ronda Rousey coming to wrestling. That was last year. We had Ronda Rousey who retired from wrestling, quote unquote. We also had the birth of AEW and the birth of Wednesday Night Wars. Fans, arguing with each other between who's better between AEW and WWE. We had the return of NWA with episodes of NWA Power. We also had Daniel Bryan cut his hair. We had the introduction of Bray Wyatt and The Fiend. Yeah, that was this year. We had one of my favorite pay-per-views this year was WrestleMania 35. Of course, nothing can take away from the NXT takeovers. But WWE, the main roster-wise, I would have to say it was WrestleMania 35. Even though it was like 12 hours long, the three biggest outcomes we all wanted that came through. I mean, we had Kofi Mania, we had the worst pay-per-views with what was it, Showdown? Super Showdown, I think it was, or Crown Jewel. Both of them, I'm gonna say. But very interesting things that happened. Now, I had notes of, like, I was going to do, like, a mini, like, awards and stuff like that. And I had, like, notes and winners and all the categories I was going to do. And somebody in my household mistakenly threw my notes away. So I don't have notes on me, but I'm going to go off the top of my head. I would have to say, as far as best match of the year, I would say, off the top of my head, Tyler Bates versus Walter. As far as, like, storyline wise, I would also have to say Daniel Bryan versus Kofi Kingston at WrestleMania. Best commentator would have to go to Mauro Ronaldo, of course. Even though since NXT went live, he's gone overboard a little bit with a lot of his puns and references to pop culture. But, that's what kind of makes him him. Let's see. Best babyface. Well, I really wouldn't call it a babyface, but, like, surprising thing that happened this year is the rise of Bray Wyatt and The Fiend, I would have to say. Worst match would have to be, unfortunately, Goldberg versus Undertaker. The fact that, even though, age kind of plays into the match and, body not really holding up, it's a match that really shouldn't have happened. And I'm an Undertaker fan, so it kind of, like, broke my heart that he put on a match as bad as that was. But he came back with Extreme Rules, and, he definitely turned it around. Let me see. All right, so a couple of other awards that I wanted to talk about. So this year, I would say Best Female Wrestler of the Year would definitely have to go to Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch went from being the badass kicker to the man, and her rise in 2018 was pretty significant, but she was hot as fire going into WrestleMania this year. Moment of the year would definitely have to go to Kofi Kingston winning the title. Having to work for a company for 11 years and finally getting, the top of it all. I thought that was a great moment. I felt that moment as well because during that time I worked for a company for 11 years and I was finally getting a lot of recognition of things that, I was doing well because I finally got the chance to, do what I need to do. Tag Team of the Year. I don't know. It's a toss-up between the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros, but I might more likely gonna have to go with the Lucha Bros. Very biased of me, I'm sure you can tell, but I feel as though the Lucha Bros. I mean, neither tag team really. I mean, they've been tag team. Both teams are like brothers, and they've been, tag team partners for a while. I guess, the Young Bucks is very more popular than the Lucha Bros, but as far as putting on pretty good matches, I would have to say the Lucha Bros. Even though they did have a couple of matches versus the Young Bucks, but there were matches where, the Lucha Bros was going against Private Party and everything. I'm going to go with, overall, I'm going to have to go with the Young Bucks, because then I just reminded myself that Lucha Bros started off very strong this year in AEW, and it kind of fell off with individual losses to members of SCU, and I think in Private Party as well. So Tag Team of the Year, I'm going to have to go with the Young Bucks. Event of the Year, if I'm going non-WWE, and really I only watch WWE and AEW, I watch a little bit of NWA, so if you feel as though there is maybe a New Japan promotion that may be a lot better, or a Ring of Honor pay-per-view event that's a lot better, then you can let me know, and I will definitely check it out, and I'll give you my honest opinion about it. But I would have to say, non-WWE, AEW wise, I would have to go with Double or Nothing. Because that was their first pay-per-view event. It really set somewhat of a high standard. A lot of people were excited for it. A lot of people were happy that, we're finally getting a big, not really a big promotion, but we're getting something other than WWE in the US. So I'll have to go with Double or Nothing. Promotion of the year, I would say WE, but I'm going to say WWE because solely of NXT. If it wasn't for NXT, WWE will probably be, on the same level. Pretty much, I would say WWE would probably be on the same level, if not a little lower than AEW. I'm sure people are going to say New Japan as far as promotion of the year, and I probably would agree with them because I'm hearing a lot of things about New Japan. I don't really watch it consistently, unfortunately, but I'm pretty sure if I got into New Japan and really watched it and get to know the wrestlers there, I probably would say New Japan as well. So going into, with the end of 2019, we're going through the end of a decade, and I was going through moments of the 2010s, and I completely forgot, not really completely forgot, but some of the things that, you realize it was dang, it wasn't really that long ago, but it was pretty much long ago. So now we're entering into 2020, and it has been 9 years since the pipe bomb that heard around the world with CM Punk. Another thing that I found out, there was a match in 2016 versus Will Ospreay and Ricochet. A lot of people didn't like that match because it was mainly a bunch of flips and things like that. That was my introduction actually to Ricochet. Because I heard a lot of buzz about what was going on. There was these two wrestlers and they did all this flippy stuff and everything. And that was my introduction to Ricochet. And I liked Ricochet and, I heard of Will Ospreay as well. But this is the first time that I really heard about Ricochet, really. So it was my first time seeing him and I really liked it. I do like a lot of spots and things like that in wrestling, but I wasn't really a big fan of doing the flips and the no sell of things just to do a flip or immediate reversal. But I did like what I saw in that match. During this decade too, in 2010, Bret Hart returned to WWE for the first time in 13 years, which I completely forgot happened in this decade. I could have sworn that was a while ago. We also had CM Punk. We had the rise of the Yes Movement in 2013, 2014. We had WrestleMania 30, which I went to, and that was an amazing experience. That was my first WrestleMania that I ever attended. I attended a lot of pay-per-view events before that. I went to, actually this decade was the first time that I returned back to WWE fully. I kept, I would watch WrestleManias and things like that. But I wasn't watching every single pay-per-view. I wasn't watching every single Raw and SmackDown. I wasn't keeping up with every single wrestler that was in the promotion. And in, I would say, late 2011, 2012 was the first, it was the first time I really got back into wrestling full time. I went to a Raw, I think that was in 2011. It was a Raw, the Slammy Awards that took place in Philadelphia. And I think that was in December 2011. And from there, I really started to keep in check with what was going on with WWE. I started to watch a little more often. So yeah, this decade was the decade that I got back into wrestling. After that, I didn't really go to too many pay-per-view events after that. The next event I would go to would be WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. It was for my 30th birthday. And like I said, if you never went to a WrestleMania live, I suggest you do so in your lifetime. It is an amazing experience. You get to be with a lot of the international fans, which are crazy. They're hilarious too. Also, definitely go to a Raw after Mania. It's a very fun time. The Raws after Mania, it really isn't about the wrestlers or the storylines that's happening. It's mainly a celebration of the fans, really. That was the Raw after Mania, which was the last of Ultimate Warrior. And it was amazing to see him for a final time because he was one of the wrestlers. The first match that I ever seen in wrestling was the Ultimate Warrior versus Macho Man at SummerSlam 92. So it really felt cool for everything to kind of come full circle with my first WrestleMania was the Mania that he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and being able to sit in the crowd and chant, thank you, Warrior, and him giving a very inspirational speech before he walks out of the ring for the final time in his life. And, it was really a touching moment. This decade also brought the end of the streak, which is still kind of hard for me to talk about a little bit, but, did I wish that, ending the streak shouldn't have happened? Yes, I feel as though the streak should have never ended. But, it is what it is. I remember seeing that match live, of course, because I was there. And I remember noticing, my cat is going crazy in the background if you hear a bunch of noise, FYI. I remember noticing that something wasn't right about the match, like The Undertaker wasn't really looking his best, and come to find out he was concussed. And you probably couldn't tell really on TV, but seeing it live, like you can tell that something was definitely off. Like I wasn't like crazy close to the ring, but I could tell like with body language, like he wasn't the same Undertaker. We also had this decade too, what people call the end of an era, and that was Undertaker versus Triple H with Shawn Michaels as special guest referee, which I could have sworn happened earlier. I didn't realize that was this decade. I could have sworn that was like so long ago. But yeah, people call that the end of a decade. This decade also brought back the return of Brock Lesnar. Who could forget when Brock Lesnar came back? I think that was in 2012. I think that was when John Cena lost or something like that. He was in the middle of a ring of a Raw, and then Brock Lesnar just comes out and just starts dominating. This also brought out Suplex City as well, that we famously knew from 2015, 2014, I think it was. I'm not quite sure which WrestleMania. No, 2015, I'm sorry. 2015 when he was going against Roman Reigns. We also had what people consider the greatest cash-in history at WrestleMania 31, where Seth Rollins ran into the main event of Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, turned it quickly into a triple threat, and then cashed in and won the title. Let's see. Sting debuted in WWE this decade with something that a lot of people like went crazy about, something that we never thought we would actually see. Unfortunately, we never got the dream match of The Undertaker versus Sting. And I don't know if that really would have made a difference if we saw it now, versus when they both were in their prime. But, everybody can only just dream, what would have happened then. Also, we had, with WWE, I forgot which, 2K game that was, with CM Punk on the cover. That probably was either 2012, maybe 2013. We have the infamous promo where we had Stone Cold and CM Punk together, with Jim Ross feeling very uncomfortable because the two men looked like they was about to kick the shit out of each other as well. WrestleMania 30, the year 2014 also brought the walkout of CM Punk, and thus began a 5-year struggle of fans wanting to have CM Punk back. The CM Punk chants all over the United States of America being chanted to WWE whenever they dislike something. And now that CM Punk is back in 2019, not back really in WWE, but just back in the vicinity of WWE. I don't know how people will feel about that chant now. 2016 brought back, I would say, one of the best debuts. I don't know if it ever, but definitely one of the best debuts of the decade, which AJ Styles debuted in WWE at the Royal Rumble. He was the third entrant of the Royal Rumble, and it was something that not a lot of people knew. It was something that kind of blew everyone's mind because of all the dream matches that we got out of that. This decade also brought out the women's revolution. Stephanie McMahon coming out to the middle of the ring to introduce, 9 women who were going to be in 3 women's stables. It was Paige, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte, I think it was, Sasha Banks, Tamina, and Naomi. And I forgot who the third stable was. I should have looked that up, but I definitely remember it was Sasha Banks in one, and Becky Lynch and Charlotte. Yeah, Becky Lynch and Charlotte was in the stable with Paige. I forgot who the third one was. But if you remember, you can definitely tweet at me what it was. This decade also brought the WWE Women's Championship, so we got rid of that stupid butterfly belt that has been haunting the women's division for so long. Goldberg had returned to WWE. We also had the Shield formed this decade and disbanded this decade as well, and then got back together as well. We had each member of the Shield becoming champion. We had the rise and big fall and rise again of Roman Reigns. He went from one of the most hated wrestlers as far as the, hardcore fans go. Of course, he had to battle leukemia. He defeated the cancer, and now he is in a feud with Baron Corbin and being doused with dog food as well. Interesting decade for Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt had won his first WWE championship back in 2017. And that was at Elimination Chamber. And people were very happy to see his rise. Of course, he would lose the title. Let me see. I think he lost the title. Was that the next pay-per-view? Or I think that was the next pay-per-view that he lost the title or something like that. I have to double check. But I think he lost that title very quickly. Jinder Mahal also winning the WWE Championship as well. The Hardy Boys returning to WWE at WrestleMania 33, I think. Yeah. Big shocking return that nobody seen coming. It was teased that the New Day was going to be entered into a triple threat. I think it was a TLC match at WrestleMania, and the New Day was hosting WrestleMania, and they said that it was going to turn into a fatal four-way. They were in their wrestling gear. They started to act like they were going to walk to the they were acting like they were going to walk to the ring, and then instead you heard the Hardy Boys music, and everyone went crazy. This decade also brought Cena versus AJ Styles. The polarizing chants of one side saying, "Let's go Cena," the other side saying AJ Styles. Of course, 2018 with the rise of Becky Lynch, Ronda Rousey coming to WWE back in 2018 as well. Daniel Bryan, who, of course, the top of his game with the Yes Movement, won the title, the WWE Championship, and I think they combined the titles that year. Yeah, he won both titles. I think it was the WWE Championship and the World Heavyweight Championship. That was before they then decided to go with the Universal title. They combined the World Heavyweight Championship and then with the WWE Championship, I think it was. And they turned into the WWE Championship. And then they introduced the Universal title. I think that was in 2015, 2016, I would have to say. Then Daniel Bryan, the next WrestleMania, would fight in a Intercontinental ladder match. I think he won the Intercontinental title in that match and then had to vacate the title because he suffered a concussion, and they found something, I believe it was in his brain, that will cause him to not be able to wrestle again. Very difficult speech that he gave. I think that was in Seattle on top of that. A lot of people, that was very tear-jerking. I mean, I teared up for it because I felt so bad for Daniel Bryan. We will also see his return 3 years later with him saying, fight for your dreams, and that inspirational speech. I was a little disappointed in WWE that they would announce that he was returning instead of just letting him show up and give the speech. But, I guess marketing purposes, they wanted to put it out there because they knew that everyone would tune in to listen to Daniel Bryan. We also got his return in 2018 as well. We also had the infamous deals with WWE and Saudi Arabia that would bring on a lot of their one or twice a year events with Crown Jewel. I think it was the Greatest Royal Rumble, Super Showdown as well, which led to a all-women's WWE pay-per-view event called WWE Evolution. It brought back a lot of the female wrestlers that we loved. Trish Stratus, Lita, I believe Beth Phoenix as well. I'm not 100% sure. I think the Bella Twins may have been in it. I might be wrong. Let's see. Of course, WrestleMania 35 would bring the first women's main event in WrestleMania history. We would also get the rise of NXT, especially with the women's division NXT. The four horsewomen of Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, and Bayley as well. And the NXT women's division continues to dominate to this day as well. We also got one of the best feuds in NXT history. I could you may say I'm wrong about it, but I would have to say it's one of the best feuds in NXT history. And that was Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. A feud that will last about, maybe 2 years? But overall, that storyline was them being DIY. And then Tommaso Ciampa turning on Johnny Gargano. Johnny Gargano becoming one of the biggest baby faces. I mean, he was like pretty much a mini Shawn Michaels and Daniel Bryan rolled into one. Then we would have a turn of events where Johnny Gargano would turn heel for a little bit. And then, of course, the, 3-4 great matches between Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa as well. We would have, of course, CM Punk versus John Cena. Who could forget that Money in the Bank match in Chicago, where I feared for John Cena that if he were to win that match, that, it probably literally, the security would not been able to protect John Cena, or the referee for that matter, or the timekeeper, or the announcer, from the thousands and thousands of fans who probably would have stormed that ring if John Cena had won that pay-per-view event. We also got the formation of the New Day. And I remember clearly seeing the vignettes of Big E, Kofi Kingston, and Xavier Woods. I thought they would become like the new Nation of Domination, because Xavier Woods would come out in a white suit with glasses, and him, and I believe it was Kofi and Big E, who would kind of like stand around and watch, a match from ringside. And then we started to get the vignettes of the choir singing and smiling, Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, and everyone hated it. The New Day would sit there and say the power of positivity and everything. And a lot of people really hated what was going on. So they turned it into something. I mean, they started to turn not really big heelish, but they would turn a bit heel, and they would be like smartasses about it, and quickly gained the affection of the fans, and they became one of everyone's group of 3 people that would turn things into funny moments. Of course, they then would go on to sell so much merchandise with the unicorn horns. Everyone's loving pancakes now. And I realized the third group of women with that women's evolution, it was the Bella Twins and Alicia Fox. So, not to be a jerk, but that's probably why I forgot completely who that third team was. And like I said, this decade was the birth of NXT. I remember hearing about, NXT coming to the WWE Network when it was WrestleMania 30. And I have to be honest, I wasn't really that into NXT back then. I was sitting there like, I felt like, and this is going to be wrong, but I felt like it was equivalent to like Main Event or WWE Superstars, something like that, where it would just be a bunch of people you didn't really know about. And I wasn't really big in the indies as well, so I wasn't like recognizing what NXT would turn into. And I remembered when I was doing being a guest on Julian's podcast, The Wrestling Court, they told me like, yo, you should really watch NXT. It's pretty good. And I started to hear a lot more good things about it. So I started to tune into it as well. And it's just been phenomenal. There really hasn't been a lot of down moments with NXT. And I think it's because NXT is just very authentic. They're not really deep into storylines, like the main roster is. Even though they have storylines, it's not like that's the driving force of NXT. NXT is mainly about displaying the best that they can for that 1 hour or now 2 hours as well. Also this year, as you know, I started this podcast. This decade, back in, when did I start that channel? I probably started I started a YouTube channel, I would have to say 2015, 2016 tops. I started a YouTube channel called The Kickout Show, and it was basically a parody. I would put together like clips of, different wrestling things. One episode I created back when Dolph Ziggler was really popular with his selling. I created like this commercial for Dolph Ziggler's selling company. I forgot what I named it. And it was basically, I got someone to do a voiceover, like it was a commercial. And it was like, do you need someone who will sell your finishers or something like that? And you like, talk to Dolph Ziggler or something. And it was pretty hilarious. It's more likely still up there. I don't think I deleted the YouTube channel, because I spent a lot of time putting those, videos together. That channel only lasted about maybe 5-6 episodes. And I stopped it because it became too much to try to edit the videos. And I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. I really wasn't organized as far as like, okay, this is what I'm going to do next. Let me get all this stuff together. I really wasn't marketing it that well. So not a lot of people was viewing it. And I started to it started to become a chore to me, and I started to half-ass it. And I didn't want to put out content out there if I wasn't 100% into it. And so I stepped away from it. I continued to be a guest on Julian's The Wrestling Court podcast. And I started to have it in my head to do a podcast, but I felt as though I didn't have the voice for it, or I didn't it felt like, it would feel weird, being a one person podcast. And then I was like, well, if I did a podcast with someone else, then it would have to be, when do you put out the podcast? You have to get on the same schedule and stuff like that. And I really didn't know that many people who was that passionate about wrestling to do a podcast. And so beginning of January, my hubby talked to me about it because he saw how passionate I was with wrestling, and the topic of a podcast came up, and I just started to look into it, and I just said, you know what, why not? And so I told myself that I would do this podcast at least for a year and see how I feel about it. I wanted to give it my all. I didn't market it as good as I wanted it to be. I was thinking of doing it as a YouTube channel as well, but I decided to kind of stick to the audio format for right now, and then eventually go on to YouTube and possibly turn it into a video podcast as well. And I got it's been a great reception to it. A lot of people like my voice, like the way I do this podcast, acknowledge that it is hard doing a one-person podcast because you're basically talking to yourself, which I have no problem with, because honestly, I sometimes talk to myself. I feel like it's healthy to kind of talk to yourself, check in and say, hey, and I tend to say things out loud, especially when I'm watching wrestling. I laugh, talk about it, comment on it, and there's no one else really in the room. So it kind of comes naturally to me to kind of talk about it, when talk to a microphone, basically, knowing that someone's going to be listening to the other end. But it's been a cool year as far as podcasting. It's been very interesting. I got to get to know a lot more people who are podcasters as well. Connecting with other podcasters, listening to podcasts and everything. But it's been a crazy year for me. It's been a crazy decade. This year, as you see, I started this podcast after WrestleMania 35. And so this only has about this is episode 34, so it wasn't that many episodes. And that's because I took a bit of a hiatus back in the summer when my grandmom had passed. And I really didn't want to put out, episodes when I'm like grieving and things like that. So that's why I'm only at episode 34, even though I started like towards the beginning of the year. But I'm going to continue on with this podcast. It has been a great time, being able to put my opinions out there and interact with everyone and, not have to feel like we all have to fight each other. Because that's what's been going on with wrestling Twitter. A lot of people feeling like you can only watch one promotion. You can only be loyal to one promotion. And I just watch, whatever is out there. NWA Power, which I have to get back into. WWE, NXT, AEW. So interesting thing. So I was watching Monday Night Raw last night and I didn't even make it through. The one thing I hate about whenever Monday Night Raw is pre-taped is that they pipe in the crowd noise so heavily. And it just makes you feel like WWE thinks you're stupid because you hear this loud reception for people and you can clearly see the crowd is just sitting still. Not trying to be a jerk, but they really put in a big pop for Cedric Alexander when he came out. And I was like, wow, that's a really big pop for Cedric Alexander. I don't think I ever heard a pop that loud for him, recently. And you see a shot of the crowd and it's just like people just standing there. They were piping in boos and stuff like that. And it's like, just let the crowd be what they are. If the crowd isn't hyped, then that's on you. Cause you're not putting on such a good show for people to really get hype about. But so I didn't really make it through all of, Monday Night Raw last night. But interesting enough, we have NXT tomorrow. I believe that was a pre-tape show as well. So hopefully they're not piping in the sound as well. I haven't really heard much of if AEW is going to put out maybe like I highly doubt they're going to do a pre-tape show because I didn't hear anything about it yet. Or if they're just going to do like some type of special on TNT where they, do highlights of matches for this year. They could have put together like, top matches this year, including the pay-per-view events, to try to get people to get reminded of what makes AEW so good. Hopefully, my hopes with 2020 is that we continue to have the Monday Night Wars, continue to have good wrestling. It's very fun to have promotions fight for your attention by putting on good matches, good shows. Interested to see how AEW pans out next year. Their 1 year anniversary in January. I think it was January 8th, they said, because they have an anniversary show. 1 year after Double or Nothing pay-per-view event, the Monday Night Wars as well, of where everything goes from here. A little bit of news, the Young Bucks have quit Twitter. The reason why they quit Twitter, according to them, is because they feel as though they were spending more time on social media than they were with fans. But yet you can still follow them on Instagram. So you're still on social media. A lot of people speculate it's because everyone was very critical of AEW Dynamite, especially the last episode where the Dark Order was the closers of the show, and you can clearly see someone was punching air instead of trying to punch Dustin Rhodes. And I say good for people for pointing it out. I know that it's hard being a professional wrestler, but if you're going to be on national TV, you have to at least know how to sell those punches. Shane McMahon is in that conversation as well. So I don't think it's been revealed who that person was, but if, the camera sees all, social media will put anything out there and it will live on for a long time. So that error punch will, be a meme, a GIF, whatever. Yeah. I wish all the luck to AEW. I wish all the luck to NXT. Hopefully Raw and SmackDown will get a little bit better, which it will, because we're now entering into WrestleMania season with the Royal Rumble coming up next month. Now we're going to start to get all the fun things happening now, because WWE is going to try to get as much as they can out of WrestleMania weekend. I'm interested to know how long WrestleMania will be this year. It seems like there will not be an NXT takeover for the Royal Rumble. So it looks like a lot of the matches will occur on the Royal Rumble for NXT, which I'm not mad at. It kind of helps out the card since a lot of people is going to be in the Royal Rumble matches anyway, including the women. So I really don't mind seeing NXT matches at the Royal Rumble. I don't know if they're going to do the same for WrestleMania. I believe there is an NXT takeover for WrestleMania weekend. WrestleMania may start at 2 p.m. this year, and it probably won't end till 5 o'clock in the next evening on Monday. I'm preparing to take off the next day like I did this year. I took off the next day because I knew that I was going to be tired as all hell at work. So I probably would do the same thing again in 2020. But to everyone listening, whether you're listening for the first time or listening for the 10th time or even the 34th time, if you've been, following me since episode 1, I wish you and your family and all your friends a happy holidays and a happy new year. There won't be an episode next week because of the holidays. I'm not really doing much really for the holidays. My holidays tend to be pretty small, just me, my family. My mom may come over. A couple other family members may come over as well. But, I normally use the end of the year to kind of get organized and, deeply clean the house and enter the new year with a clean house and a clean mind. So the next episode, episode 35, will be in January. January, let me see, that would be January 4th, 5th? I don't have a calendar up. I'm taking a guess. But happy holidays to you. Happy New Year. I hope 2020, the next decade, the 2020s, will bring a lot of peace, joy, and happiness to you. And I cannot believe we are entering the year of 2020. And I feel so old entering the 2020s. The 2020s will bring the age of 40 to me. And you've probably seen pictures of me. I know I do not look my age at all. I'm 35 years old. As you probably know, I always say I'm the same age as the WrestleManias. So yeah, I'm feeling very old, especially when a lot of things that you grew up liking is now ancient. So it is what it is. But thank you for listening to the Wrestlebread podcast. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Jaydee Talks, and also follow the podcast at Wrestlebread. And like I said before, happy holidays, happy new year, and catch you in the next decade. Until next decade, guys. Peace.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Check us out at Wrestlebread.com and subscribe to Wrestlebread on YouTube for more breaking news and JD's opinions.